Good morning to today's Morning Boost. Today's topic, as you have seen, is if we should go nationally or internationally. When should you do it and how should you do it? Those are questions that the speaker has experience about. And today's speaker is Manolo. He's today a business coach at Founders Loft, but he's original from Mexico. And he's been working with Forza Football for 5 years and been sales head of sales. Yeah, don't be too shy. So we are really glad to hear about your experiences. So please welcome Manolo to today's speaker.
Okay, let's see if this works. Can you hear me with this? I might get a little bit too excited, so then let me know if it's too much, and then I'll turn out just lower the volume of it. But yeah, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you for coming and showing up on a Wednesday morning. Everybody up there, I know you couldn't get tickets, but it's okay. Next time maybe. So I want to talk a little bit about selling internationally, and it sounds great. I mean, yeah, we should all try to sell internationally and try to make a thing out of our business outside of our own home country or even our own hometown, right? But can I do it or should I do it, right? So those are the type of questions that it's really helpful to ask ourselves when we're thinking about going internationally, right? But first, I want to talk a little bit about me because I'm awesome. I really like talking about myself, so you guys have to bear with me, all right? So a little bit of course, of my work. I started a company in Mexico when I was in university and then kept going with it for some years after. So in total, I was 8 years with Crealid, and what we did is we developed leadership courses and better communication skills for young adults, and we sold that to private schools in Mexico because the system over there is more towards the private sector in terms of education. So we could sell it. We sold it to the parents, and then they were super happy that their kids were learning how to be better leaders, better communicators. Then I also started another company in Mexico called Logoff, and it was the early stages of a dark kitchen, which meant that we had just a couple of cooks there, and we had people that wanted to get good and healthy food during the week when they were working in their offices. They didn't want to cook. So we prepared different menus per day for about 3 weeks. And the idea was that you would pay upfront for the month. And then you would always get different dishes for the day. And we also specialized in the delivery. So I think kind of obviously hindsight is 2020, but I think we lacked a little bit of imagination in this particular area because this is 2012. So it was I don't know if you guys ever heard about Spoon Rocket, which was the before Uber Eats and before there was another one in the United States, or like in Palo Alto. And so I think we lacked a little bit of imagination for that, but this is what it is, right? Then I met my girlfriend, now wife, in Mexico, and I moved to Sweden. I started working at in a bar here in Gothenburg, and I was just pouring beers for the people who liked football. And then I met somebody who worked at Forza Football. Long story short, I started as a creative account manager for Forza Football, where I was overviewing Nike and Adidas in the Nordic level. And then I moved on to become head of sales, where I increased the wallet of the clients that we had, the customers that we had in Forza Football. We went European level with Nike and Adidas, brought in Puma, Heineken, MasterCard, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, so all of the really, really big brands who are involved in football, who, I don't know how football involved you are, but in the Champions League, for example, you see all of these sponsors. So that was my job, to get them at a European level or a global level. And so I was there for about 5 years. Then I went to London, I did my MBA, and I came back to Gothenburg, and I started in Founders Loft, and I'm a business coach there. So what I try to do is help startups go from their problem solution fit to an early stage of product market fit and everything that goes in between. I always say that half of my job at Founders Loft is kind of having some sort of knowledge about business and some challenges that I give to the people that I coach. And the other part is I'm just their psychologist and just I'm just a bouncing board of frustrations because it's not easy to be an entrepreneur. And just to round it up, I'm also a mentor for Founder Institute here in Sweden and for 500 startups globally. So that's a little bit about me. Now, just to give you a context of Forza Football, in case you don't know it, I won't spend too much time. I'm not getting paid to do this. Forza Football is a football app, and we got live scores, or they have live scores. I don't work there anymore. It's about live scores. It's everything that happens during the 90 minutes of a football match. Lineups, penalty kicks, red cards, goals, etc. So you get notifications and you can follow your favorite team, etc. Just so you kind of understand what I'll be talking about. By the way, I couldn't find a different screenshot, but Real Madrid, worst team ever. That's all I need to know. That's all you need to know. So Forza Football, we're talking about football, right? By default, we are talking about an international phenomenon, right? You can see here the amount of people that watch the World Cup, right? It's increasing. It's on the billions, and obviously there's no one country that can reach those numbers. So there's always football going on. There's literally every single day. We don't realize, but there's football going on in India. Then there's a match in China for the third division. Then there's another match in New Zealand. So there's always football going on, and it's international. So by default, we thought, okay, this is it, right? We are an international. We can offer something international, so we can go sell to international markets. And this one over here is one of my favorite pictures. This is Mexico City during the World Cup 2018 in Russia, when Mexico scored against Germany. This is the Richter scale. So there was movement on earth because the Mexicans were so happy that they scored against the Germans. So this is how impactful football is for people, right? And so it should be easy to sell it internationally. But of course, before we start selling internationally, how did we scale internationally? How did we get there? How did we get people to download the app? So there was a big push on the PR level. So there was a lot of content done on different newspapers. So all of the growth that we had was done through PR and then word of mouth, because we had such a good retention rate. And again, we were an easy to use app, and it was all about football, and people liked us. So everybody started recommending. That's how we grew. So it was all organic, but it was also all random. Now should have been a red flag. When I came into Forza Football, this was already set in place. But this should have been a red flag because it was random growth. We never thought about where do we want to grow and why do we want to grow in certain countries, right? So this will come back and bite us can I say bad words? No. In the butt. It will come back and bite us in the butt at some point, that there was random growth. So just to give you an example, Sweden and Denmark, we had about 300,000 monthly active users. In Italy, we had about 600,000, and in UK, we had about 200,000. Then, here and there in other countries, but those are just some numbers so you get an idea of where we were. In Forza Football, we had two revenue streams. One was brands, and the other one was betting companies. So we thought, again, we're talking about football, and we're talking about big brands with big pockets, right? We should be just waiting. We thought, okay, we'll just sit here, the phone will start ringing, and then people are going to throw money at us because they wanted to start working together with us in Forza Football. So what we did with the brands and with the betting companies is we try to come up with creative solutions as advertisement for them to be part of the app, right? So in betting, of course, finding creative ways to add odds into the match, live odds before the match, who's going to score, etc. For the brands, it was about creating engaging campaigns for when Cristiano Ronaldo or when Lionel Messi scored a goal. So you could see the boot, and then you click, and then you go a video, and then you go to the website so you can buy their shoes, right? So it was very targeted like that. And so again, we thought just people are going to throw money at us, right? Again, international markets. Then two things that we need to keep in mind for this conversation is markets are different from each other, and customers inside each of those markets are also different from each other. And this is going to set the stage for kind of what I want to talk to you about internationalization in my journey in Forza Football particularly. We realized after a lot of back and forth and a lot of head banging against different clients, that in Norway, the betting companies are willing to pay up to 400 euros to acquire a customer. In Italy, it's about 80 euros. What does that mean? Of course, we all know that Norwegians have a lot of money because oil and all these things, right? But how much they are betting on a weekly basis is crazy compared to the Italians. How did we figure this out? It took us about a year and a half to figure this out. And I'll tell you kind of how this is going to, again, come back and bite us in the butt at some point. The Danes spend twice as much on betting than the Spaniards do. The Brits, they like this feeling of going to the kiosks or the stores. And I mean, if you've ever been to Britain, there's at least one betting shop in every single corner in High Street. Like it's crazy because people like going there. They're okay with betting online, but they just like that feeling of going. Sometimes they will go there, they'll talk to people, and then they place a bet online. So all those type of relationships that they have with the way that they bet and how much they bet, we weren't necessarily aware of them when we started thinking, yeah, let's go and sell, right? By the way, I should mention, Forza Football is a Gothenburg-based company, so we were here in Sweden, or they are still here. The French, they don't trust the internets. They don't like them. They don't trust it, and so they don't really place bets online. Interestingly, a 10-year-old football player in Sweden is thinking about buying shoes. They're not buying them themselves. They're trying to convince their parents to buy them. But the average cost for each shoe is about 200 to 250 euros. In Portugal, it's anywhere between 80 and 100. So it's just like the difference in spending power is great. It's considerable. Nike and Adidas, who were part of our main partners on a European level, and again I was in charge of them. They care a lot about Paris. They care a lot about Madrid, Barcelona. They care a lot about London, Manchester. And they don't really care about Copenhagen. They don't really care about Stockholm. They don't really care about Oslo, for example. Even though, as we saw before, the purchasing power of a Swede is way higher than a Portuguese, and is still almost twice as high as a Spanish consumer. But what they cared about on a brand awareness level was Madrid and Barcelona, right? The Swedes, they are okay with receiving ads in English. If it's in Swedish, good. But if it's in English, that's also good. But don't do that to the French or the Spaniards, because they will be very annoyed. First of all, they won't understand it, and then they will be very annoyed. So they don't like it when you give ads to them in English. The Germans are weird, right? We all know that. No, I'm kidding. But Germany had a football app that was called One Football, and the Germans were very, very loyal to that app. So every time that we tried to go and sell to Germany, we would always find ourselves competing with One Football with other brands, because they decided, okay, we're going to spend money on One Football instead of spending money on Forza Football, right? So after all of this, I mean, it took us, this is just, and the reason as to why I think this conversation is quite relevant is because it took me about 4 years of just headbanging and going against the wall and trying to figure it out as we go, which I understand. This is what a startup is, right? You go out there, yeah, let's go, and then you fail, and then you come back and you think, okay, this is part of the process. Sure, yes, it is part of the process, but there is a better way of doing this, and this is hopefully what you guys can take out of this conversation today. So one of the things that after all these conversations we realize is we need to have focus on the markets that provide with a higher ROI on our sales, right? Instead of going and trying to convince the Germans that Forza Football is a great app and we can do all these crazy things, maybe we should stop Germany for a bit, figure out how we grow in that market, how we can create penetration in that market before spending all this time and money and resources trying to sell to them, right? and then look into the countries that are not as profitable and individually figure out why are they not profitable and how do we solve that particular market instead of just approaching Europe as a whole. Particularly, and this is I guess a cultural situation. I come from Mexico. To me, Europe is Europe, and it's just a big square like that, right? It is the European Union. But when you come here, then you start figuring out all these nuances on how people do business, what do they like, what don't they like. So all of these things could have been prevented if we had done some things that hopefully, or that I'll show you in a bit. The other thing is we needed more people selling to betting companies rather than brands because we started growing the team. I brought in three salespeople to help me out with brands, and then the betting side got stuck with only 2 people. And we realized after 2 years that it should have been the other way around. The reason being, it's easier to sell to Nike or Adidas or Puma or Heineken on a European level because they have centralized budgets. But with betting companies, it's all about each individual country. So you need more people to reach out to those individual countries and individual brand managers for Unibet or Bet365 or whatever the case might be, right? There's also, obviously, the betting product is much more nuanced, and there's a lot more regulation going on the betting side than it is for Nike or Adidas. And so each country has a different legal structure for betting. And Sweden is actually is quite liberal when you compare it to Italians, for example, or even Spaniards. So there are all of these nuances that, again, it took us about 2 years to figure out. And once we reshuffled, then we started seeing the light. So again, selling to Bet365 or betting companies is not the same as selling to Adidas, right? Internally, we also figured out that we didn't necessarily have enough development power to deliver the campaigns that we had promised, both to the different betting companies in each of the countries, because again, they have nuances, and to the brands. So we didn't have that. We also realized that we weren't ready to deal with the backlash that came from working with betting companies and alcohol, Heineken. So we had to actually, I was the first one in the world who proposed and actually managed to get a Heineken 0.0 campaign out there because they had just launched 0.0 and they didn't know how to deal with the brand yet. And I was the first one who created this concept for them to work with 0.0, and we launched it on a global scale. So that was really cool. But even then we had backlash, and we didn't have the customer support to deal with that backlash, with all of the comments and all of the suggestions that we received, right? So that's internally. We also figured we had bad translations, both in the app, but also in some of the ads. So that also is it's just terrible user experience, right? That's not what you want. Because then in a way, you lose your potential customer. Oh, it went all the way back. You lose your potential customer when you're not respecting their own language and you don't do it right. And again, as I said before, we should have had a better deployment of Salesforce in key countries, or countries that had, again, better ROI for sales. So again, going back to the first slide, selling internationally sounds great. Can I do it? Should I do it? Right? So all of this this experience that I talked to you about in Forza Football, then I want to try to translate it into a little bit more actionable steps, so that it just doesn't become a conversation of Manolo came in and told us how awesome he was at Forza Football and how much he messed up until he actually figured it out, right? So hopefully with the next slides, I can give you a little bit, something more tangible to work with. So when you want to sell international, can you do it? Sure, but do you have the localization services and the customer support that's ready to serve that particular country? And just think about languages. That's just the first start. But then you might go to India, and then there's so many nuances between the north and the south that you want to make sure that you can actually talk that same language, but also have the same type of cultural approach to customer success, for example, customer support. Do you have the budget to support the marketing, to support the sales efforts, to support the brand efforts, the growth efforts in each of the markets that you want to go to? Do you have the kind of personnel to figure this out? Is it development, or is it logistics, or whatever the case might be, right? Do you have that? And if you don't, how do you build it? Do you have the legal requirements to sell in that particular region or in that particular country? Also something that you need to consider. Um, do you have the marketing power to deliver the message that you want to deliver? Because it's not the same, and I can tell you by experience, it's not the same going out to Sweden and selling Forza Football because we had 300,000 people. It's not the same thing going to Italy where we had 600,000 people using it. People knew about us. I would go in and people would not treat me like a superstar, but they were like, oh, I have the app, and we would talk a little bit about this and that. But if I went to Mexico, nobody knew about me. I mean, I went to Heineken and I went to Nike and Adidas, Mexico. They didn't know about me. So the marketing effort, we should have done a little bit more push on that side so people could recognize us, and then we try to sell, right? Do you have the logistics, the vendor operations to figure this out? Again, I, in Forza Football, was particularly selling something that's easy to explain, and everybody has a phone. But if you're selling a particular product, is it a physical product? Can you deliver it to your client? Can they pay in their own money or coin? Like, how do you call it? Currency. Can they pay in their own currency? So all those things are things that, can you do it? Yes, but you need to figure these things out. The other thing is, should you do it? And this is where I try to be a little bit more proactive and give you some tools, hopefully, which is something that we also do at Founders Loft. Make an assessment, run an analysis. Do or 2 or 3 or 24. Doesn't matter how much. It doesn't matter how much you do, as long as you have a rationale behind your processes, right? So do a SWOT analysis. Do what's it called? The needs approach, benefits, and competition analysis. Do a PEST. Do a SWOT analysis. Do a Porter 5 Forces. Do whatever you need to do, but get yourself more information before you jump into this selling internationally adventure, right? Or you can also just create your own assessments. This is one that we created at Founders Loft, and it's super easy. It's just about, okay, what's your market segment? Give me the names. It can be per segment, but it can also be per country, or you can break it down into 2 countries and 2 segments in each country, and then you just give yourself a little bit of wiggle room of, okay, what type of market is this? What's the size of the market? What is the power of the buyers? What's the purchasing power of the customer that I'm trying to reach out to? And then you give it a rating. And then you say, okay, out of, from 0 to 5, these are the ones that are most, that I can reach out to the easiest, that are going to give me the most amount of money or return of investment when I go sell. So these things you can do yourself. Then we created another one here, just a different example. What's the size of your TAM, SAM, and SOM? What are the pros of selling to that market? What are the cons? And again, just create this environment for you and your team to succeed when you are trying to sell internationally. So as a kind of wrapping point, because I don't want to bore you, I believe that selling internationally is just the same as traveling kind of on your own, right? Why do you want to travel? What's the reason as to why do you want to go? Because you want to party? Because you want to go some sort of adventure? Do you want to, right? You want to see this very particular, a lot of people in Mexico like, I want to be in Paris because, the city of love and the Tour Eiffel and blah, blah, blah. So fine, that's fine. But you know why you're going there, right? And so you're going to try to figure out your whole week around that particular situation, which is in this case, let's say, the Eiffel Tower. Where do you want to travel? Again, is it you want to go to Zambia? Do you want to go to Colombia? Do you want to go to New Zealand? So depending on where you want to go, then you're going to prepare differently. If you want to go to the north of Sweden in winter, you got to prepare differently than if you want to go to Cancun, even if it's winter, right? So those type of things really, really matter. How will you get there? Are you going to take a plane? Are you going to take a bus? Are you going to take your car? Are you going to rent a car? Are you going to get a taxi? There was I'll probably go over time, but there was a guy that I knew when I was doing the MBA, and so he's from Russia, and he was trying to go back home, but this was high COVID times, like everything was closed. So he had to, the way that he figured out to get back home to Moscow was fly from London to Kiev, and then from Kiev he had to take a taxi. So So he actually figured out a way to get a taxi. And that is like 24 hours driving. So the taxi drove him for 24 hours. But how will he get home? He needed to get back home. That's what he needed to do. So he took a taxi, whatever the case might be for you guys. So think about how will you get there, because that also defines your budget, your possibilities, the time that you need to spend to get there, etc. Who are you going with? Are you going with friends? Are you going for a bachelor party in Cancun? Or are you going with your family to La Toscana in Italy and just having a couple of nice evenings with some good pasta and some wine? So all of these things matter. And then, of course, at the end of the day, what's your budget? Can you go all in, and can you spend all this money on champagne, or are you going to have to eat frozen pizza for 3 days, right? So in a way, when you're thinking about selling internationally and expanding internationally, think about these questions. What do you think about when you travel? And those type of questions should allow you to run at least some sort of safe assessment for your own company. First of all, can I do it? And should I do it? And that's it, right? No. Do your research. I mean, this is just a kind of wrap up, right? Do your research. Think about localized versions of your product or your service, your website, your app, whatever the case might be. Think about local sales units if possible. One of the things we recommend that to a company recently here in Founders Loft, but we could have done that in Forza Football as well. You don't always have to be the one that's selling the product always, all the time. You can find somebody in Italy, for example, who can take 50% of the revenue for what you're selling. And it's fine. You lose 50%, but you earn 50% that you didn't have before by selling it in a different market. So it's okay to give your product to somebody else to sell it, and they can take a good chunk of that. But again, you need to think about it. Is that really what I want? Is that really where I want to grow? But think about localized sales units, because they are really, really relevant. Think about customer support. It's so important. And everybody, nowadays, we're all expecting incredible customer support, or I will never come back to you, right? So these things are really, really relevant to think of before you start selling internationally. As I said before, make sure that people can pay for your product, because then, I mean, they might love it, but if they can't pay, why are we here? And check the market potential, run your assessments, and make sure that this is something that is relevant for your company and is going to provide a good ROI for you and your company down the line. Now I'm done. This is my LinkedIn, so if you want to connect, you can just scan it, or send me an email at manolo@foundersloft.se. And thank you very much. I don't know if you have any questions. What's the deal?